all we're doing is we're asking for the Electoral Court to provide us with a fair answer on what the facts are.
The system was not closed at 9 o'clock, and the only party which had internal problems of registration was the ANC.
A day of drama as the ANC decides to go to court to force the IEC to open the candidate list registration. And the EFF vows to oppose the move. We bring you both parties' arguments, plus an independent view on what this development could mean for the Independent Electoral Commission. And later on in the program, the results of a survey that's showing decreased confidence in politicians and some of our election institutions. All that and more coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. The ANC may not be able to contest elections in about 30 municipalities. That's if the Electoral Court rejects its application to have the IEC reopen the candidate nomination list process, which concluded this past Monday. The ANC will be approaching the court tomorrow. Meanwhile, the EFF is opposing the ANC application, and they are going to tell us why. To get us going, here's an insert by our political reporter, Natasha Piri.
Disgruntled ANC branch members from Ward 73, 47, 95 in Hammanskraal and Ward 33 in Soshanguve marched to the IEC's headquarters on Monday, claiming that candidates who were elected by the community were removed from the list. In another similar situation, some disgruntled ANC and community members in Ward 46 in Soweto have accused the party of imposing a candidate they did not elect.
So this gentleman has been imposed on us. He displays continuous bad behavior, and his reputation does not at all warranty him to be even considered a ward councillor.
The ANC is plagued with such challenges and many more, and is now heading to the Electoral Court to ask for more time so that the party can make corrections and additions to the candidate nomination list they submitted to the IEC.
Our deadlines were very, very hard to meet. We faced numerous challenges. Many candidates' IDs were rejected due to the absence of voter registration during the period. So they were not registered properly in the ward where they were selected as a candidate, and therefore the IEC system didn't have them as a registered voter. That was one of the reasons why some were rejected. Secondly, as we were entering, the IEC system repeatedly froze.
The EFF, which opposes the ANC's request, has accused the IEC of not being transparent about the nomination system and extending the time to accommodate the ANC.
The system was not closed at 9 o'clock, and the only party which had internal problems of registration was the ANC. But leave the system closing at 9 o'clock. The IEC says to us, we are postponing the closing time from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock because of the queries that came from different political parties. They don't give us the names of those political parties. How do you call that a transparency? They postponed the time because the ANC could not miss the deadline of 5 o'clock.
But Duarte refutes this.
Have had absolutely no phone call whatsoever to any person in the IEC. I just want to say that very bluntly and very openly. But, you know, to insinuate that we acted in a manner that was not credible, I reject with the contempt that it deserves.
Duarte says the ANC is assessing the impact of the challenges pertaining to the candidate list, and further says that in some instances the regional secretaries are the ones who change the names of the nominated councillors on the list. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Joining us now for some reflection is Terry Tsalane from the Institute of Election Services of Africa. He's also, of course, a former commissioner, a board member of the Independent Electoral Commission. Mr. Tsalane, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Just what do you make of what the ANC told us this afternoon?
Well, any political party that is aggrieved by the processes in elections has got what you call they are empowered to approach any court or any organ that can actually be able to assist them to be able to deal with the matters that they are aggrieved about. Mm-hmm. Now, coming to the issues that have been raised, and I'm not familiar with the issues that the ANC is raising, mm-hmm. But obviously the Commission would have the capacity to deal with those issues. I've indicated that there are two important sections in the legislation that empowers the Commission to be able to deal with matters relating to the grievances mm-hmm. That the African National Congress has. Firstly, it is Section 20 of the Electoral Act, which empowers the Commission to amend the election timetable after it has had a discussion and a conversation with a party liaison committee mm-hmm. at the national level. And then the second one is Section 30, subsection 6 of the Electoral Act, which also empowers the Commission to be able to change the candidate list or allow for substitution if they feel that it is in the interest of free and fair elections. But because I'm not familiar with the issues that have been raised, mm-hmm. I'm not able really to deal with the nitty-gritties pertaining to the issues that are being raised by the ANC. But as I've suggested, Section 30 allows any political party that is aggrieved to either approach the IEC or the Electoral Court, and both are empowered to deal with those kind of issues.
To what extent, though, Mr. Tsalane, could the minister's proclamation of an election date, one, secondly, the outcome and the recommendations of Judge Moseneke's process, to what extent could those two have hampered or tempered with what the IEC is able to do in terms of Section 20 of the Electoral Act? In other words, to what extent were their hands really tied?
No, in relation to the two issues I've just raised, it is really within the capacity of the Electoral Commission to deal with that because it is regulated in law. Mm-hmm. So if the Commission wanted to invoke those two provisions, they would. So the Minister's proclamation has got nothing to do with Section 20 of the Electoral Act, which empowers the Commission to amend the election timetable. The election timetable, it's basically in the realm or the purview of the Commission. Mm-hmm. And in Section 30 as well, as I've suggested, also empowers the Commission to be able to take decisions within their capacity. Mm-hmm. Now, the Minister's proclamation is important, of course, and it's important to the extent that once the election date has been proclaimed, it means the elections have got to happen on that day. Mm. And secondly, that it closes the voters' roll. But remember that the country really has a very credible voters' roll. Currently, you've got 25.7 million people who are registered. And therefore, that voters' roll, it's still an important aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, coming back to the issue of Justice Musane's inquiry, Justice Musane's inquiry was not a legal advice to the IEC, nor was it a judgment in the electoral processes. Even though all of us have got enormous respect for Justice Musaneke, and he really came up with a very credible report about the process that he was investigating. But he has never suggested that this was a legal opinion for the IEC. And then therefore it remains a property of the IEC. It remains one aspect that the IEC could use for whatever purpose, but it is just a report of the Electoral Commission.
Now, something also happened on Monday, which presumably speaks to Section 20 of the Electoral Act, which says, as you pointed out, empowers the Commission to do something in the interest of a free and fair election. The Commission moved the deadline from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. All right? And just after 8 o'clock on Monday, the ANC had, one must add, a hastily convened briefing, where they spoke about their readiness and actual ability to meet that deadline, which then suggested that when you decide to go public, with your readiness, you are convinced that you will have done what is required of you in terms of the law. Just your comment on those two facts, which I think are material in this conversation. To this conversation.
I can't talk about the issue of the readiness of the political parties to participate in the process. However, the Electoral Commission has got a responsibility and an obligation to be transparent with all the political parties. There is a structure called the Party Liaison Committee. It is not a decision-making structure. It is an advisory structure to the IEC. It is constituted by all the political parties represented at the national level in the National Assembly. That structure is important essentially for the IEC to consult every time they've got to take important decisions in the electoral process. If the Commission does not do so, it becomes vulnerable to criticism that it is only listening to one political party. So if it goes to the Party Liaison Committee, at least there are minutes of the parties that are represented there, which indicates how many political parties are supporting a particular view and which are those political parties. And therefore, they can actually be able to come into the public domain and say to the public that there was a request at the National Party Liaison Committees. The following political parties were represented by so many parties or representatives, and here are the names. And then even though a Party Liaison Committee, it's an advisory body, the Commission can be able to take a decision based on the advice of the Party Liaison Committee. You may also be aware that even Section 20 of the Electoral Act says that before the Commission can determine the election timetable, it will consult with the National Party Liaison Committee. So National Party Liaison Committee, even though it is not a decision-making structure, it's an important structure because firstly, it allows for transparency, but it also allows the IEC to be able to consult with all the political parties in one forum and not individually, because if it does so, there's a problem of vulnerability of being biased.
Lastly, Mr. Tan, before I let you go, just as someone who served in the IEC as its deputy chairperson, in situations like these, where it would appear, the integrity of the IEC, or at the very least of its systems, is being called into question, or at least that may well be what some people may read into this. How worried does the IEC become, or how concerned does it become about issues like this? And bearing in mind that, this is an organization that, truth be told, has actually carried itself. It's been, one of the, poster children, of efficiency when it comes to, these public matters.
Of course, it's a matter of concern, and that there are all these allegations that are being raised. And the Commission has got a duty and a responsibility to allay the fears that the public may have about its independence, and the fact that there is an issue that is being raised about being biased towards a particular direction. So the Commission must actually be able to demonstrate its independence and its capacity to take decisions independently of any persuasions or influence from any other political party.
Mr. Telane, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Terry Telane, who is from the Institute of Election Services in Africa. Up next, we speak to the EFF's Treasurer General, who the party only a short while ago issued a statement saying it was going to oppose this ANC move. Before I get to him for his response and his party's, her party's position, let's just take a listen to what Jesse Duarte said was the reason why they have decided to do what they announced this afternoon.
We had entered the data, it froze, and it was not accepted on the other side, even though on our screen it would say admitted. So there is a difficulty, and we would like that to be recognized and corrected. We made the IEC aware of it immediately. And we also made a formal representation to the IEC to consider this. The IEC has written to us to say that their closing time was firm, and therefore they were rejecting our appeal, and for that reason we are going to the Electoral Court. We hope that we will be successful in our bid to have opened only for those areas where there were mistakes. We're not asking for the IEC to reopen the whole process. We only want to have the integrity of our list corrected.
Good evening, Umpile. Obviously, your party doesn't buy that story. Certainly, looking at the statement you issued a couple of hours ago.
Good evening to you, Vio, and the viewers of SABC. So, we're not. The ANC is clear that they are full of crooks and people who want to cause chaos in this country. From as early as July, the president of the ANC announced that the elections will be held on the 27th of October, and he did mention quite a number of times that the ANC is ready, including the very same Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, many occasions that she has had. She said they are ready for holding the elections. She even went to the former Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke to say that the ANC is ready, we should continue. And that would have meant that the timetable of the IEC, which was also confirmed on the 3rd of August, that's 3 weeks ago, that the registration of candidates will still take place. So what she's saying, it's not true. The reality is that they did not register their candidates. Yesterday, I was on an interview and the presenter said to me, the CEO of IEC said that they were uploading and not necessarily capturing. Today, we received a letter from the IEC because we wrote to them and asked them why was the system open and were there candidates that were registered after 9 o'clock. And they did confirm that 74 candidates were registered after 9 o'clock. So they must perhaps release the 74 because we suspect these 74 candidates are actually ANC councillor candidates. That's why you see the ANC actually confirming by the statement of the Deputy Secretary General that they are going to approach the court. So we're going to oppose it because that's opportunism. They are not ready. They've been claiming to be ready. I mean, we are the ones who've been calling for the postponement of the elections. Bona, it can't be them today who are claiming that the system, for that matter, they should have done this thing long time ago because they were more than ready, more than anybody else. And if they had anticipated that there could be issues like this, there was an option of manual submission. So there's no base for their request. The reality is that the staff of the ANC has not been going to work because they've not been paid for 2 months. We saw them today closing the offices and toy. So they are like that, the ANC. They are failing to clean up their house, and now they want to blame it on the system. There's no problem with the system of the IEC. The system of the IEC is fine. In the past, it was able to capture those volumes. So what happened yesterday? There's no such thing. They are late, and their candidates should not be registered. The system is closed. We are now ready for the 27th of October, or whether it's February elections, we're going ahead with the elections.
Well, the former deputy chair of the IEC was saying, well, it's their right. Section 30 of the Electoral Act allows them to do what they are doing. Let them exercise the rights that they actually have in terms of the Electoral Act.
Correct. Well, we're living in a democratic country. We also, must not be shocked by such things. It's their right, and it's also our right to go and oppose, and we'll give facts why we're opposing. Because if we're going to allow this, and I said this yesterday, that if it's like you're writing an exam, you're starting an exam at 9, you're finishing at 12, and now come 5 to 12, you're claiming that no, there's some technicality and all that. Doesn't matter. The system is closing at 12 o'clock. So the system closed yesterday at 9, which we were not happy with because initially it was closing at 5. And then the IEC took a unilateral decision to just postpone it to 9 o'clock, which that on its own also we got a problem with. But that's fine. So everybody complied to the instruction of the IEC. Now, there's not going to be any extension because then tomorrow we're going to be told that no, this voting station, which had no people at 9 o'clock in the evening, had to remain open, even though there were no one at the voting station. Because they didn't get enough people to come and register. So we're going to oppose it because we think that it is unfair and it will render these elections not free and not fair at all. That the ruling party, which is in disarray, is disorganized. They are unable to clean up their mess, and they want to plunge everybody into the mess of the ANC. We have complied. The party that we've been labeled not to be ready for the elections, but we complied. And so the ANC can't be really coming to say technical issues. There's no technical issues. So we're going to oppose that thing. And we believe that the court, including the IEC themselves, because this is about the integrity of the IEC. The IEC should come out very strong to say they believe in their system and they should prove to the court that technically there was nothing wrong with the system. And we believe that because the CEO said they were uploading, and I said You can't say you're uploading when you're allowing the capturers to continue capturing. And indeed, we are proven to be right as the EFF because, yes, 74 candidates were captured after 21 hours.
What is your view of the IEC's ability, or can you vouch for its systems?
It's upon them really to prove to us that they are not. But a system is a system. If it's programmed properly, it should do what it's supposed to be doing. You can manipulate it. But I was comfortable with the letter from the IEC that actually says that, indeed, when the IEC comes, initially they wanted to deny it because when the CEO was saying they're only uploading, I had a problem with that. But when the formal letter from the IEC came and said, in actual fact, EFF, you are right, 74 candidates were registered after 9 o'clock. So it gave us a little bit of comfort. And I'm hoping that they will not backtrack from that. So the system, yes, they can manipulate it, but you can manipulate it to a certain extent. So let's see what comes out of this. But we have an official letter that says the 74 candidates were registered after 9 o'clock, and we suspect that it could actually be of the ruling party because they are the loudmouth now, trying to come up with all nonsensical things of saying the system was not uploading and whatnot. No, it's not true. We were uploading even at the same time, just before 9 o'clock ourselves. There was never an issue. Why would there be an issue with the ANC when there's no issue with anybody else? There was never an issue with any system. The system worked perfectly. We are happy with the system. IEC must release the 74 candidates so that the ANC can be seen for who it is, because they did not register the people now they want to blame on the system of the IEC. There's nothing like that.
Okay, that's all going to leave it. Thank you very much for your time, Umpile Maudwe, who is the Treasurer General of the Economic Freedom Fighters. We're going to take a quick ad break. After the break, we speak to an analyst about what she makes of the ANC's decision to go to court tomorrow morning. Asanda Mwasheng is a political analyst. She joins us now. Asanda, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Just what you make of this development, the ANC deciding they're going to court tomorrow because the system that they were supposed to use to be able to be compliant didn't work for them. It had technical glitches, it froze, and as a result of which there's about 30 wards that the ANC won't be contesting if things stay as they are. Your thoughts?
I think that this is yet another case of the ANC showing us or reminding us of its entitlement to votes, entitlement to systems, even if they don't follow all of the rules. I think if other political parties could work within the system, could deliver and do what they were supposed to do within the system, I'm not sure how the ANC didn't manage to do it. And also, I think that, the ANC could potentially be using the technical glitches of the system as an excuse for its own failures, because you must remember that the ANC workers are on strike, and there's a whole lot of things that are going on internally with the ANC, which make it very likely that the capacity to be able to do the job of registering people and fulfilling all the administrative paperwork that's required was just not there.
Now, you're right, because, as the EFF just said, they too were subjected to the same regime, but they believe that the IEC has done well, under the circumstances, especially. I was talking to the DA earlier, trying to find out whether they have had problems. They say, they did all their stuff on time to make sure that they don't have to do things at the last minute. And I remember on Monday, literally minutes before the 9 o'clock deadline, we had the IEC here on the show who said, 1, 9 o'clock was going to be 9 o'clock, and 2, where there had been instances of, where people encountered problems, the IEC was actually able to help them. So no one seems to be complaining here except for the ANC.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, they're the only people complaining because, as I've said, I think it's actually more a human resource and a human capacity issue than it was a technological issue. We've all been there where you're trying to hand in your document at the last minute and the system freezes, or even if it doesn't freezes for whatever reason, you miss, the midnight deadline, etc. And so I think we would appreciate the ANC a lot more if they were being honest and saying they just didn't have the capacity and they're having internal issues which have made them unable to meet the deadline, and then approach whatever court they approach on the basis of honesty. The problem we have right now is that they're blaming a system which in some ways might actually be possible to prove at X amount, at X time, what was the system doing and how did the system behave. That's something technologically that is possible to investigate. And I think that, as I've said, there's a sense in which the ANC forgets that the ANC, as Jesse Duarte very clearly reminded us, it's 1.4 million members in a country of 55 million people plus. And so we cannot, and I've said this before, we cannot have a situation where we are constantly being held hostage as a country by a group of people that total 1.4 million in a country of 55 million plus. And this is yet another example, because those 30 plus wards that they're saying they won't be able to contest. So what? You missed the deadline. There was a deadline. You've missed it. And there are other political parties within those areas. It's not as if without the ANC, this election cannot go on. There's a sense in which we as South Africans allow the ANC to forget, and the ANC itself forgets, that government is still government, whether the ANC is there or not, that the state is still the state, whether the ANC is there or not, that elections are still elections, whether the ANC is not. Because at the end of the day, from a democratic perspective, the ANC is just another political party. It may be the one that has won the majority of votes in the past. It may be the one that is currently governing, but it is still, at the end of the day, just a political party like all others, and it should have followed the instructions that they were supposed to follow and met the deadlines that they were supposed to meet. Because what happens now in the next election, if other political parties decide, well, the deadline is negotiable and we'll just go to court if we don't make it on time, what's going to happen then? We cannot allow a situation where the ANC is constantly allowed to make, to create new spaces where it doesn't exist. We're seeing it with Jacob Zuma and the handling of Jacob Zuma. We're seeing it with corruption and the handling of corruption. And now we're seeing it even in basic tenets of our democratic system, making sure that the people who need to be appointed or who need to be registered as people standing for votes are standing. We are on a very slippery slope, and the ANC is constantly trying to push the envelope, and we really should not be allowing this. I wish them all the best of luck in the courts, but I don't know if it's a good thing if they win in the courts. But of course, that's for the court to decide, and I think it's going to be one of those situations where opposition politicians and opposition parties are going to have to play their role of reminding the ANC that it is just another political party and was meant to follow the same rules and the same ethics that everybody else was supposed to follow. And that they have failed should not now be a problem of South Africa or even a problem with the IEC, but rather should be forcing the ANC to look internally to say, what is wrong with our systems? What is happening with our capacity? And why were we not able to do the one thing? They literally have one job, to contest in elections. And they are failing at the basic tenets of contesting elections, which is also a sign for some of the failings that we're seeing in government and in their governance of South Africa.
Now, throughout this process, of course, it's been an open secret that the ANC has been having, problems. Among those problems, members who don't want to accept decisions. And leaders who unduly tampered with the lists, or lists that didn't go down well with some of... in fact, let's take a listen to what to Jesse Duarte this afternoon admitting to the latter.
Honestly speaking, we have to say this very openly, that some of our regional secretaries in some areas tried to change the list that had already been approved by the NEC. And that created a few problems, because the NEC on the 22nd sat too late at night, and we approved lists that were presented to us by provincial secretaries in the presence of their provincial chairpersons. So I think that we must say that this is a problem we will have to correct within the ANC, is this perennial view that individuals have, that they have a right to make changes, and those changes create problems down the road for the ANC.
Could those problems be, the real reason we are where we are?
We were in Xhosa, there's a saying, ibhongo lingaba likhulu umbombo uyaqhosha. We are seeing the result of the arrogance of the ANC. We are seeing the result of a lack of governance, a lack of leadership, and a lack of accountability. Because under normal circumstances, no person would feel they have a right to change a mandate that is coming from the ANC. Under normal circumstances, everybody would be following the party line and playing the role that they're supposed to play. But we know that the ANC is on a mission to sabotage itself. And maybe that's the best thing for South Africa, because the beast is eating itself from the inside out. And the problems of the ANC that have become the problems of South Africa are now spilling over in each and every action and activity that the ANC is participating in. And the lack of accountability, the lack of ethics is exactly what is at the heart of this. Because if people feel they have a right to go so far as to try and change a decision that is coming from the highest body within the ANC, then it tells you that there is no authority. And it tells you that there is a disjuncture between who is understood to be in leadership and who is actually leading. And so what I see here is the ANC sabotaging itself. And personally, as somebody who's just tired of seeing the ANC bamboozle their way through leading this country, I'm quite happy for them to self-sabotage in this way, and I'm quite happy for them to break themselves up and allow us the opportunity as South Africans to develop, a governing system within South Africa that is for South Africans and that works in the interest of South Africans. And if it means that this sabotage is going to make sure that there are 30 wards that have new options and new alternative options outside of the ANC, then good on opposition parties who now will have an opportunity to contest elections and will have an opportunity to show their mettle potentially and start to create a world in which the ANC is not the center of our lives, and a world in which the ANC is reminded that it is just another political party, and that the political system will move and the political system will continue whether they are there or not.
Asana, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there, because I still want us to talk about the possible impact of these developments on the integrity of the IEC. But I just want to bring in Pule Mabe, who is the spokesperson of the ANC right now. Mr. Mabe, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Just speaking to political parties earlier, the few I could round up. I mean, they were compliant in spite of, the challenges they had, and because they did their stuff on time, where problems were identified, they were actually helped, and as a result, they have been compliant.
Evening, Budvuyo, and evening to your viewers. Of course, the ANC would have done everything else in its power to make sure that it complies with the requirements and timelines set by the IEC. Systems are systems, Budvuyo. They do have glitches. It's not about non-compliance on the part of the African National Congress. This does happen from one election to another. It's not necessarily a new thing. And of course, the Electoral Act does provide, empowers the IEC through the Electoral Court to adjudicate and take actions that allows parties where there could be possibilities that there were glitches or this or that error to be able to resolve those. I mean, matters that are dependent on systems may or may not go well. Systems always have their own glitches. The ANC, and to this point we have been emphasizing over and over again, the ANC, it's a big organization, has got to deal with a number of all other issues. We're putting our case forward to the Electoral Court, especially in those areas where there might not have been submission because of systems-related problems.
But Ampule, I mean, you know your organization's problems, very well. And you knew that this whole process was very much contested. So you ought to have shown leadership, as Asanda was saying, and be proactive about the problems and you should have anticipated these problems. And as you say, you are a big organization, bigger than any of the other parties. So you ought to have known that you are going to take more time, to get where you needed to go.
Well, Budvuyo, we had done everything possible in our powers to make sure that we really comply with the timelines set out by the IEC. The DSG did clarify a point that we didn't even participate in saying to the IEC extend time to allow us and all of that. Of course, there are certain lessons that...
No, but it did. I mean, the IEC did that. I mean, deadline moved from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And here's what puzzles me, among other things. A few minutes after 8 o'clock, you had a briefing where you said you were ready. We took that briefing live here on the show.
True.
Questions were posed, and you were confident. The DSG yourself were confident that you are going to meet the deadline.
Remember, okay, but Vuyo, maybe just to assist here, we did meet the deadline. In terms of us at the time of submission, making sure that each and every name of each and every word of each and every PR councillor is available. So the issue really was not about us not meeting the deadline. It was really about the system. If you look at the report of the ANC, you will see that actually, even where it might not be reflecting on the side of the IEC, the ANC actually had that information. So we called the press briefing because we knew that every bit of information that we needed to have to load on the system was there. So the system do their own rendering and all of that. I'm not the systems technician. So there's a case being put forward tomorrow before the Electoral Court by the African National Congress, because these mediation platforms are created to be able to do this sort of things. I mean, as a democratic country, especially one where we make the loudest noise in terms of our elections being free and fair, it must be in the interest of political parties that everything else is being done well within the prescripts of the mandate of the Independent Electoral Commission to make sure that elections are conducted in a space and environment that provides for free and fair elections, that every political party or everyone who contests even as independents feel that their rights to contest and participate in elections have not been infringed upon and they've also not been disadvantaged by whatever circumstance. And such rules are there in the Act of such rules are provided for in the Electoral Act in terms of what should be done. They are relevant sections that really speaks to that. So the IEC wouldn't have, can I just conclude? The IEC in the Electoral Act, there would not have been such provisions if the drafters of our laws did not anticipate that situations like this could exist from time to time. So the drafters of our laws must be commended because they did foresee that a possibility like this one can exist. And you do not want the outcomes of an elections being contested on the fact that people feel that they were excluded from participating because of what they can present to have been glitches.
Okay. Quick answers to these two questions. The first one is, do you not feel bad or do you not feel that whatever you have as reasons or excuses for doing what you're doing now, simply it doesn't make a great deal of sense, given that you're the only people who have this problem? So, yes or no, do you feel bad? Yes, no?
Well, but I don't think that we should really say we feel bad in a situation where rules are provided on how that situation should be corrected.
Okay.
If we were bringing up something that is outside the normal, something that is not even permitted by the rules, then we would perhaps answer you in the affirmative. But
okay, we'll see what the court. We'll see what the court says. We'll see.
Yeah, okay. Of course. I mean, we are.
No, I'm saying we'll see what the court. It's fine. We'll see what the court says. Then can I mean, if you lose in court, are you going to turn around and say to your members, "It wasn't us, it was the courts"?
Well, Voyo, it's a matter of crossing the bridge when we get there, But here we are as a responsible party, taking accountability and being responsible, and then using the relevant prescripts of the law as provided to deal with the situation that we are confronted with. We are not going behind. We are not going behind others and using our position as the governing party to try and rig the rules. Okay. We are following every rule, and we are also coming out ourselves. We are coming out ourselves to speak on our own behalf and explain our own position. We are not asking anyone. We did not outsource the function of being responsible to any other person. We're doing it ourselves. Okay. What does that do? That shows that we are willing to account on whatever we are doing. We could have decided to keep quiet and said, hey, this thing is going to embarrass us if we talk about it.
I wouldn't if I knew that 30 minutes, I wouldn't be represented in 30 municipalities. But thank you very much for your time. Asanda, just what you make of what Pulemabe has just said right now?
When I still used to lecture, every single assignment would have a student that would have every reason why the system failed, and them and only them were not able to get in and turn it in, didn't do what it was supposed to do on time. Basically, the dog ate my homework. That's what I'm hearing. And as I've said, I don't have a problem with the ANC going to court. I don't have a problem with the ANC following the procedures that are there should things not work. I have a problem with the ANC not being honest and telling us the real reason why they didn't meet the deadline, and being honest about, the bits and pieces that they're giving about people going against what the NEC has said. If they were being honest and telling us the honest truth and putting that in front of the judge and making the judge decide if that's good enough reason for them to be given an opportunity to fix the situation, I would not have any problems. I have a problem with blaming a system, and I think that the IEC needs to come out and tell us if we need to be worried about its systems, because those are the accusations I'm hearing from the ANC.
And
the problem is the IEC, and the problem is not the ANC. And that is dangerous for me, because already it's now making statements like if our country is free and fair elections, etc., already casting aspersions about whether or not the election would be free and fair if they were not allowed. That is problematic for me. There was a system.
In fact,
and they failed.
And that's where that was going to be my last question, because the mentioning of strenuous deadlines, the mention or the calling into question, the IEC's systems, throw up, issues of integrity, of efficiency, and so on the part of the IEC. Something we should all, I'm not saying not question, but something we have to zealously guard.
This is, for me, this is classic ANC, right? Do the wrong thing for the wrong reasons and blame everybody but yourself. Even the refusal to even talk about whether they feel bad or not, it speaks to this arrogance. If you remember, there was an ANC campaign not long ago where they were dabbling in saying abanavalo. And my question is, they're showing us, they're used to not having uvalo. They're used to not being worried and anxious about meeting systems and participating in democracy under the prescripts in the required time. And so that's why abanavalo, as you can hear, abanangxaki, it's not them, it's not their problem, it's a problem of the IEC. And my question is, as the governing party, how responsible is it to be casting aspersions at your most critical system of democracy, the IEC? How good is it to already be talking about whether it'll be free and fair or not? You are the ones who have failed to meet the requirements of the system, and the judges have a right to actually say no. They don't have to say yes. They need to rule on it, they need to ponder it, but they don't have to say yes. And unfortunately, it is South Africans who do unfortunately support the ANC who will be denied an opportunity to exercise their right. But that doesn't mean that we must now be held hostage because the ANC has failed to do their part, which is critical for South Africans to be able to exercise their right and their ability to vote for whoever it is that they want. And I want to remind us again that there's a government without the ANC, that there is a country without the ANC, and that the ANC is just another political party. And we should stop treating it as if it is the only political party, or that there is no election, that there is no government, and that there is no South Africa without the ANC. And they're showing us this by already putting themselves in line and under threat of not being represented in 30 wards. That is a big deal. There should be shame in the statement rather than the arrogance of calling out the IEC, instead of admitting that they have failed themselves and they have failed the people that support them.
Thank you very much, Sasana Washing, who is a political analyst. And that's where we're going to leave it. Do join us again tomorrow evening at 8 p.m.